Well, it's time for the June tour. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to get a May tour done, but it is beautiful. We've had a lovely, 2-3 weeks, and I've been really busy, so the plot is looking okay, but basically it's what I can do in the morning for half an hour and in the evening for about an hour. So managing to get about 10 hours on the plot a week. So I'm going to take you around and show you a few of the transitions that are going on. I'm not quite finished clearing my winter crops, but I'm almost done. And I'll show you how that's going. Let's get on. So I'm going to start with the plot and then we'll do the polytunnel last. We've got a lot of experiments going on and a few of them are in the polytunnel, but most of them are out here. So shallots for the first time in many years. I'm growing and they're looking okay. There's lots of salad onions in there which I'm gradually clearing out. They're probably going to be small because I'm not going to thin them, because I want to just see what the kind of mix of small shallots and big shallots ends up being. And yeah, so experiment number one. Probably regret it, but we'll see. Colettes are looking really nice at the moment, and I've got them under this Envirotect, which I've just pushed back just so we can do this video, but that is keeping the butterflies off, and yeah, the plants seem to be enjoying it. I've got salad onions around the edges, and actually where this frame is here, down there where the old fence used to be, I've got squash, and squash are going to grow up canes, which I haven't put in yet. And then I basically wind the vines around these horizontals, and then the squash hang from these horizontals, which are slate battens. And then down here we've got the Brussels sprouts. We've got quite a lot of these brassicas kind of scattered around the kitchen garden and our perennial plot. I'll show you those in separate tours pretty soon. And they've got a little trial of potatoes just grown outside in the ground, which I don't normally do. You know, I normally grow them in containers, but I thought, well, let's just do a few, and hopefully I'll get those harvested, and then I'll pop leeks in after those. I'll show you those leeks a bit later on. And then we've got Mikado, which is my favoured spinach for this time of year, because true spinach bolts. And Mikado is just so nice. It's really quite superior, I think, to true spinach. And then we've got the gooseberries, and I have been spraying these for sawfly with the appropriate nematodes, which is the fruit and veg protection nematode. And the crop looks reasonable. And more importantly, I've still got some leaves on these plants, which I often don't have. So let's take a look underneath this net where I've got the beetroot. I haven't actually looked underneath here because we've got a lot of leaf miner around at the moment. I'm kind of a bit worried that the leaf miner will have got through this net, but it might not have. I was actually quite worried about this beetroot because it's been planted out on these really hot days, and I was kind of thinking, yeah, it's probably going to really suffer. But actually it's all looking really good. There's a few leaves that have died, but generally speaking it's looking good. There's little bits of bindweed growing up through here. But, I'll dig those out later. Some mare's tail, but yeah, pretty good. I'll leave that off just for a few minutes and I'll give it a water. And then here we've got the main crop onions. And here we've got the winter and spring carrots. So these are the Eskimos that I sowed a couple of weeks ago. And I think they're looking pretty good. I'm going to take the net off at one end so you can have a look underneath. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. Germination looks spot on. Here we've got the elephant garlic and the trees. Pretty good amount of fruit on these. and I've just done the summer kind of prune on this cherry tree, although there's a few bits that I still I've missed. But yeah, it's looking pretty good. These are the Brabants. Obviously get these thinned out a bit, but yeah, very happy with that. So down here, these are the potatoes that were done in pots at the same time as those potatoes were done in the ground. So that's kind of like for like comparison. And then I've got blueberries and onions and more blueberries down here. And then this is one of my experimental sowings. So these are early red cabbages. I'm hoping that these will heart up just a little bit before the ones that I sowed back in February. And right now, I think that's happening. So there's some pretty good little hearts in here, in a few of them. And this is going to be one of my carrot beds. So it's going to get cleared sort of late June to mid-July sort of time scale. And that will just be a progressive harvest from this end to that end, and I'll just keep re-sowing and keep them covered. And then down here, so these are just bits that came out of the polytunnel. So got some sickly little tomato plants, because these were the ones that were sown in that dodgy compost that basically killed most things. A few of the tomatoes survived, but they're not great. And a few potatoes that are ready for harvest, just all dying back. And some more of these sickly tomatoes down here, and some squash just out of the wind. And yeah, then we've got all these horrible covers. Let's have a look inside. These two beds are notionally pepper beds, but there's also beetroot at the back there, and that beetroot's looking really lovely. And some more beetroot down here, which is ready for harvest. And then we've got salad onions around the outside, and lettuces interplanted. Lettuces ready for harvest down here. And then we've got the first succession of the peas, which I think I'm on my third week of harvesting these. They're going a bit crazy. We're feeding basically everybody on the allotment site, it feels like, with peas at the moment. And yeah, I like to point out that there's not many plants here. So if you kind of look down here, where you can see the planting density, hopefully you can see that probably there's only, I think, 6 modules, 3 peas per module or something like that. So there's 18 seeds down there, and then 18 seeds down there. So, and not all those plants will have succeeded. So yeah, in total perhaps 36. But you can see that, you know, harvest doesn't suffer. You just get bigger, healthier plants as a result of a lower planting density. Some spinach out here, just popped another succession of lettuces in there. And that was lettuce interplanted with onions, and I'm not really sure whether those onions have pulled through, but they might. Here we've got the early Brussels sprouts, so we're just starting to get some sprout tops forming on these, and as soon as we get the sprout tops, I'll start taking a few of those off, and that'll stimulate the production of the sprouts. So should be eating sprouts by July, hopefully. And this was an experimental sowing of Brussels sprouts that didn't work. It was a different variety to my trusty early variety, which is full basket. So anyway, put some calabrese in. Under this little low tunnel, I've got my first watermelons in here. And I'm going to put some more melons in today. I'll show you those later. And I've just kind of popped a few lettuces in around the outside. It's a little bit hot for lettuces in this low tunnel. Obviously, conditions that are right for watermelons, it's not exactly going to be right for lettuces, but we'll see how it goes. I don't know whether you can see all those seeds there. Golden purslane. I love golden purslane though, so I think I'm just going to leave those in and yeah, harvest those plants whilst the watermelons grow. And then here we've got the early onions, and I'm going to harvest these very soon, you know, maybe this week. I don't want them to go to seed on me. There's just a couple that are going to seed there, but I think actually those are salad onions that I put in just because I didn't have quite enough overwintered onions, tough ball onions, and red winter down the centre. But yeah, I'm pretty pleased with these. These have really grown nicely in the asparagus bed, and we've harvested a ton of asparagus at the same time, so it's a really nice interplant. Should give it a good feed and let the asparagus grow on in a week or so. And this was that beautiful lettuce bed. I don't know if you might have remembered in the last tour. I was very happy with it, but I just had so much lettuce I couldn't get it all harvested in time, so the onions kind of suffered a little bit for being kind of overcrowded a little bit by the lettuce. But yeah, I think they've recovered okay. And around the outside we've got Leela salad onions, but I'm going to leave those to grow on just to get lots of lovely sort of little pickling onions and little onions for salads. And then the ones in the centre are Red Baron, and I'm going to let those obviously mature as well. And they don't need to be under this cover. This cover is just being stored here. It's going there where those cauliflowers are. And then this is my summer and autumn carrot bed, or one of them. And it's got beetroot at the back there, and these are the beetroot we're currently harvesting. And yeah, they're really gorgeous. And once I've got those out, I'm just going to put another row of carrots down the back there, so I get a bit of a successional harvest there. One of my pepper beds, another one with beetroot along the back there. And that one is also full of turnips. And they're coming on nicely. And in here we've got choy choy, again sort of almost ready for harvest. And then I'll give those peppers a bit more space, probably interplant them with lettuces again. Back here I've got my new summer fruiting raspberries, which are growing up between these wires. What a mess I made of these wires though, absolutely awful. And here we've got some of the early potatoes, so these are the ones I want to sort of be harvesting middle of July. And these are all baking potatoes, or destined to be baking potatoes. And they don't need to be under this cover. This cover is going there where those cauliflowers are. These cauliflowers due to be harvested in a week's time, and that calabrese could be harvested now pretty much, because it's, well, I suppose it has got a few decent sized shoots still on it, but it's all this bed is going to be melons. The next succession of brassicas in there. It's a bit hot for brassicas in a greenhouse, but I've got that shade netting over there just to help them out a little bit. And then we've got garlic with this perpetual strawberry mange de bois or something like that down there, and just a few little bits and pieces of garlic and shallots and things there. And then we've got beans, French beans, radish, celery, radish, more French beans, and little tomatoes here. And basically this is just like a spare bed. So this is going to be purple sprouting broccoli in July, but I just didn't, I didn't know what to put in here, so just put loads of spare things in. So I'm hoping to get a harvest off there before I have to pull it all out and put the purple sprouting broccoli in, but if I don't really care, because I've got better versions of all of those things growing elsewhere. And then on this frame here, we've got all sorts of different climbing squash, and they're all kind of planted like this through the paths. And got little bits of fleece here because it's still very cold at night, so I'm giving them a bit of protection. And then over here I'm not using fleece, I'm putting these pots over the top of them. So this bed is going to be melons today, so just got some 3 cauliflowers hopefully to harvest off that 2 big ones and a little tiny one probably, but I don't really mind. There's a few little cabbage whites around, so I'm going to get those brassicas covered up in a minute. Not these. I so hate nets, but they are kind of necessary, mainly because of the pigeons. And these plants will be too big for the pigeons to be interested in pretty soon, and then I'll switch over to using BT as a spray to kill the caterpillars and get these nets gone. So in here we've got the early parsnips and the shallots, zabun shallots. There we've got the second early strawberries, looking really nice. And here we've got the early kales. So this bed's going to be replaced by purple sprouting broccoli in July. So basically we're just harvesting this for the next month, and so we don't mind that it's gone to seed because we're harvesting the seed heads as well, so it's actually a bit of a bonus. We're still getting nice leaf quality, and yeah, these, particularly the green curly kales, are still really tender. These are a bit tough now, these red ones, but they just look pretty. So I don't do too many of the red ones early. I did do a few cabbages, and a few of those are going to seed again, but I don't mind about that either. So those two look fine, and a different variety of the red. And then we've got some more of those early cabbages, which are again both hearting up quite nicely. These are the carrots that we're currently harvesting, and we've just finished harvesting that tub, and that one I've obviously got a potato growing in it, but honestly I'm just not going to disturb it, just going to let it get on with it. I've had a few of these go to seed, you always do with early carrots, so it's not really worth growing a large number of them. So we only have enough just for Debbie and I really at this time of year. As I say, just because of the risk that if we grew more then loads would go to seed. And then down here we've got potatoes and onions and more onions, and this is all about to be cleared and replanted today. The polytunnel, we've got the parsley which is going to seed, and these are my, well, what do you call these? Second early courgettes, I guess. So they're coming on really nicely, and again I've got some fleece there because it's cold at night. We get to the polytunnel. Probably the most important thing at this point in time is this double layer of mylar blanket, which I'm using to make sitting in here really quite tolerable and enjoyable. Potatoes, so these are the early baking potatoes, and so I don't do very many of these, just enough to get us through June, and I've got 3 tubs left, so basically 4 weeks harvest or thereabouts. Well, 4 weeks, not half, 3 weeks of harvesting and 4 weeks of eating. And a few peppers. These peppers are not looking very good in here. Again, these are all grown in that dodgy compost, so none of my peppers are looking good at the moment because of that. A few lettuces, a few bits and pieces in here. Polytunnel is a real mess at the moment, but I have finally got my sickly tomatoes planted, and pretty soon, hopefully, they won't be looking sickly anymore. Now they're back into real soil, and we've got the celery, which I've had to pull back here to make space for the tomatoes. Courgettes, we're doing fantastic now. So we're getting 6 courgettes a week off these 3 plants, and that'll probably only increase as the nights warm up, but they're not needing any protection in here. A few little bits and pieces down there, and then the French beans, I pinched those out, but I need to pinch them out again. So we've got little beans coming on these, which is nice. I always get this, I don't know what it is, some sort of virus infection or something like that on them, but it doesn't seem to affect the harvest, it just makes them look like they're not being cared for. There's some more potatoes, and then I've got 4 tubs of tomatoes in here, which are not looking too bad, and there's a reasonable number of little tomatoes forming. Spare tomatoes, which I don't need. And then I've got 2 cucumbers, which are going to grow up the side here. And then I've got the early beets, which I'm just leaving to size up now in here, because I want the ones outside to be harvested before these. And I'm going to put some squash in here, because these are the early peppers, and they're not a very important harvest for me, these. You know, I just want a few early peppers, and I'm getting a few early peppers, but I don't really need these plants because I've got plenty of plants outside. So I don't mind if I grow some of these squash on and let them climb up in the roof of the tunnel. So that's my plan for that. And then these are the melons. So I'm going to put 2 of these out today, and I've got 2 more to go out next week. And then finally, up on my IBC tank, I've got my main crop leeks. I've got some in the ground, and I've got some in these big pots to be transplanted after that spinach and after those potatoes. And I've got a bit of parsley, and I've got my next batch of carrots down there. And then we've got the early broad beans, which are doing okay. Unfortunately, we had this really high wind just for about an hour, and it just broke a whole load of the stems off. So yeah, there's not, well, I suppose there are little beans in there, so I'm just leaving those on until tomorrow when I do the harvest. So I thought what I'd just do is just show a few of the harvests from the year so far, since we're almost kind of halfway point. And I think I picked about £3,000 worth of food so far, so it's not a bad year. Yeah, my name's Steve. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.